Chapter 18. Tiffany. As Tiffany looked around the room, she wondered if she'd made a huge mistake. Working tonight had seemed like the perfect solution yesterday when all she wanted to do was get far away from Israel and Sophia. But now that she was here, she couldn't keep the thoughts of Israel from her mind. She was fairly confident she would not see Israel, but the distraction she'd hoped to find with the kids wasn't working so far. She should have just stayed home because her heart certainly wasn't in it tonight. Seeing all the smiles of the kids and the parents who dropped them off just reminded her of how dumb she'd been. "Do you want some tape to hold that smile in place?" Allison, her assistant, whispered as she leaned close. "It keeps slipping, and your moody expression is going to scare the children." "I'm sorry," Tiffany sighed. "I should have just stayed home, but it's lonely there. I thought this would help." Allison placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know now is not the time, but if you want to talk about it after the kids leave, I'm around." Tiffany managed a small smile. "Thanks. I may take you up on that." She pulled her shoulders back and attempted to blow away the gloom she felt. "But for now, let's get these kids working on some crafts." Chance hadn't given them any specific items to do with the kids during the bash, but he had suggested some sort of craft they could give to their parents when they left, and Tiffany had readily agreed. She knew the kids enjoyed making things, and the parents enjoyed receiving the gifts. It was a win-win for everyone. "Okay, who wants to make a birdhouse?" Allison asked the growing group of kids. "Raise your hands." An enormous shout went up from the kids, and Tiffany smiled at how excited they were. She could do this. She could feed off their excitement to help her get through the rest of the night, and then tomorrow she could wallow in her pity again. Tiffany grabbed the box of birdhouses she'd picked up at the craft store the day before. They were already put together, allowing the kids to focus on decorating them and not having to worry about gluing them and making sure they stayed stuck together. "Okay, everyone, Miss Allison is getting paint and markers. We also have feathers and glitter and all sorts of things to decorate your birdhouse with. All we ask is that you only take one so that we have enough for everyone." She set the box down in the middle of the table and was immediately swarmed by little bodies and reaching hands. Within seconds, nearly all the birdhouses were gone. "I sure hope we don't have many latecomers." She smiled at Allison and shook her head. "Or I may have to go make an emergency store run." "I can send my brother if we do." Allison set down the paint, markers, and other decor and stepped back as another grabbing frenzy began. "He's sitting at home doing nothing anyway." "Good to know." The room grew quiet for a minute as the children concentrated on their birdhouses. Tiffany could see varying looks of intensity across their faces. The kids who didn't enjoy art as much displayed goofy smiles as their hands whipped willy-nilly across their birdhouses. Feathers flew and glitter glistened as it soared through the air. But the more artistic kids had an intense focus on their faces. Each color was placed in deliberation, and feathers were applied with flair, glitter with glamour. Though all the houses were beautiful, the skill and pride from some of the children shone through on the projects. "What do we do now?" Timmy asked as he pushed his birdhouse toward the middle of the table. "I'm done." Of course he was. "Don't worry, buddy. We have more planned. But until everyone is done, we're going to hang around in here." Tiffany shook her head at the exuberant young boy who always seemed to do everything as quickly as possible and find trouble wherever it was. Timmy was the kid hardest to keep entertained during the week. His mother worked in housekeeping and his father cooked at a local restaurant, so he spent long hours in the daycare center and had already tired of most of the toys. It didn't help that his attention span was about the size of a gnat to begin with. Just when she thought she'd found something to entertain him for more than 5 minutes, he would announce that either he was done or he was bored. It was a constant routine with him. He pouted for a moment before realizing that meant he could go back to playing with the workbench and pretending he was Israel again. With a skip in his step, he hurried to the workbench and grabbed the wrench before sitting down at the sink and pretending to fix the pipes. That had been his favorite pastime since Israel had fixed their sink. At first, Tiffany had found it sweet and endearing, but now it was just another reminder of how stupid she'd been. When the last birdhouse was finished, she and Allison moved them to a counter to dry, and then gathered the kids up for the scavenger hunt. Okay, now the sun is going to be setting, so you need to stay in teams. One of you will have the flashlight and the bag, the other will have the list. The first team to find all the items on the list and then find Miss Allison or myself wins, though we have prizes for everyone. Any questions? Darla, a cute older girl in the back with a stylish bob, raised her hand. Where will you and Miss Allison be? Tiffany smiled and winked at Allison. We'll be outside watching and helping, but we can't guarantee we'll stay in one place, so you'll have to keep an eye out for us. Bobby, one of the youngest boys, raised his hand. What if we get lost? This time, Allison fielded the question. I've set up a perimeter marked with yellow caution tape. As long as you stay inside the perimeter, you can't get lost. It's just a big square. So if you think you're lost, find the tape and then follow it until it leads you back here. No matter which direction you choose, you'll return to the resort. So be sure you stay inside the tape, okay? She looked at each individual child, waiting for a nod of understanding before continuing. Here are the team assignments. We put older kids with younger kids, so don't be mad if you're not with your friend. We needed to make sure we stayed as safe as possible. As Allison handed out the team assignments, Tiffany handed out the materials. The kids appeared excited, though also a little apprehensive, and she couldn't help but feel nervous herself. They'd wanted something to get the kids engaged and playing outside, but maybe a scavenger hunt in the late evening wasn't the best idea. Of course, the sun was still out and would be for another few hours, but it would be darker in the forested area where they had set this up. One last thing, she said, hoping it would never have to be used. If for any reason you get separated from your teammate, come back here and we'll help reunite you. Do not go off searching for them alone. Got it? Yes, Miss Tiffany, they echoed. Okay, let's go. She led them out of the room and down the hall toward the exit. And though they could have taken a faster path, she made sure they passed the large conference room where the dancing for the grown-ups was being held. Unsure exactly why she'd felt the need to peek in, she was unable to keep her eyes from scanning what little of the room she could see. And while everyone inside appeared happy, she could not be certain she'd seen Israel. Had he come, or had he decided to stay home after all? No, more than likely he was enjoying his night with Sophia and not thinking about her at all. She should do the same. I see we took the long way around, Allison said, as they reached the back exit and the kids were set free. Any particular reason why? Tiffany shook her head. It's stupid. I was trying to see if Israel was there, but of course I couldn't. And why do you care if he's there? Allison glanced at her briefly before returning her attention to the kids, running back and forth in search of their treasures. A soft sigh slipped from Tiffany's lips. He asked me to the bash, but I was dealing with something, so I said no. When I told him I'd changed my mind, Sophia had already asked him and he'd accepted. We haven't really spoken since. So, are you upset that he didn't wait for you to maybe change your mind? Or that he didn't dump her when you finally came around? What? Tiffany's mouth fell open. No, nothing like that. I'm upset because… But she stopped. Why was she upset, really? Yes, she was mad at herself for saying no in the first place, and she was frustrated that he accepted another invitation so quickly. But if she were truly honest, she supposed she was irritated that he hadn't canceled on Sophia to take her. I'm awful, aren't I? She asked as the truth set in. No, not awful, just human. However, you should be proud that he didn't dump Sophia just because you came around. That means he's got integrity and that he'll stay by you if the time comes. You're right. I know you're right. But it's hard knowing he's in there with another woman. What if he decides he likes her more than me? Tiffany hated the insecurities flowing from her lips, but perhaps voicing them would allow her to move past them. Allison grabbed her hand and smiled softly. What if he doesn't? What if this date is just that, a date he accepted because you said no originally? What if he's just as miserable as you are and hoping that you'll talk to him tomorrow? Tiffany thought over those words. Could there be truth in them? Thank you, Allison. I needed to hear that. Allison squeezed Tiffany's hand before letting it drop. They stood, watching the children run back and forth across the fields for a while, giggling and laughing as they placed things in their bags and hurried off to find the next item on the list. This was a good idea, Tiffany said to Allison. Thanks. I come from a big family, and my parents always used to do stuff like this for us. I remember that I always enjoyed it, so I figured the kids would too. Well, you were right. I almost wish I could be out there with them. A light feeling of sadness fell across Tiffany's shoulders as she remembered that she might never be able to do this with kids of her own. Would she always live vicariously through these daycare kids? Allison laughed beside her, bringing Tiffany back from her pity party and to the present. Next time, I'll make a card just for you as well, okay? Tiffany was about to answer when a loud boom echoed across the sky, followed by a streak of lightning. Was it supposed to rain tonight? Allison asked, fear filling her eyes as she looked back at Tiffany. No, there was no mention of it. A sense of unease erupted in Tiffany's stomach as she looked up at the sky. The soft dusk that had greeted them when they stepped outside was gone, replaced now with menacing gray clouds that looked ready to burst. A freak summer storm. They didn't happen often, but when they did, they came out of nowhere, and they could be fast and furious. We have to get the kids inside now. Allison, understanding the danger, began hollering at the kids and waving for them to come back in. Confused at first, the kids who could see them merely stared for a moment until another loud boom sounded and the first drops of rain began to fall. Soft at first, the kids lifted their faces in surprise. But when the drops turned into a solid sheet of rain a moment later, they hightailed it toward the resort. Tiffany and Allison began counting the kids as they huddled under the porch roof, wet and shivering. But when Tiffany reached Eric, the boy assigned to Timmy, her heart sank. Where's Timmy? Tears filled the boy's eyes as he shook his head. I don't know, Miss Tiffany. I'm sorry. When the first boom sounded, he got scared and ran. I tried to follow, but I lost him. Then I remembered what you said, so I came back here. Tiffany placed one hand on Eric's shoulder and lifted his chin with her other. It's not your fault. You did the right thing coming back here. Now, Miss Allison is going to take you all inside. She turned from Eric to meet Allison's eyes. Contact Dougie when you get back inside and let him know what happened. Then call Becca or Harper and see if they can come in to help you. If neither of them can make it, call Mary Beth. She'll know what to do. Allison nodded, though her eyes were still filled with fear. What about you? I'm going to go find Timmy. By yourself? But it's getting dark and it's pouring. Are you sure it's safe to go alone? Though Tiffany knew Allison was right, she also knew they were wasting precious time talking. No, but if we're scared, imagine how afraid Timmy must be. I'm sure Dougie will organize a search party to join us. Hopefully, I'll be back before we need them. Tiffany had no idea how long it would take her to find Timmy, but she hoped it wouldn't be long. Okay, stay safe. I'll be praying. Praying. Yeah, that was something she should be doing too. Tiffany nodded and flashed an encouraging smile to the kids before heading out into the forested area.